Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving into the legendary Viking Berserker, those fearless Norse warriors who charged into battle bare-chested, possibly intoxicated, and absolutely furious. Before you settle in, hit that like button if you enjoy my content, and subscribe if you're new here. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing our global community come together. Now, let's set the mood, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for some ambient noise, and let's begin tonight's journey. From the moment you entered this world, you were anything but ordinary. Your birth announcement wasn't a gentle whisper but a thunderous roar, fists clenched, face crimson, lungs operating at maximum capacity. The midwife swore you howled continuously for 7 minutes, possibly a local record. When the priest tried to bless you, you bit his finger twice. Right from the start, you stood apart from other Viking infants. While other babies cooed, you growled. When they napped, you glared at the ceiling as if it owed you money. Even the family goat refused to enter the longhouse when you were wailing, which was most of the time. By crawling age, you'd already established yourself as a tiny force of destruction, headbutting hearthstones, biting livestock, and picking fights with your own shadow. Your parents oscillated between concern and reluctant pride. Your mother affectionately called you bear cub, while your father assured neighbors you'd grow out of it, usually while bandaging fresh wounds. While other children played peacefully with wooden toys, you broke yours to fashion weapons. You practiced battle cries against trees, challenged rocks to combat, losing only when your cousin tackled you mid-roar, and developed a reputation that had elders muttering words like spirited or possibly cursed. After the mead barrel incident, you were 4. You were banned from certain areas. The village shaman claimed you had the fire in your blood, while your grandmother insisted it was just worms. In this harsh northern world of stoic fishermen and quiet survivalists, you were a shirtless whirlwind of untamed energy and unpredictable fury. Farming? Not your calling. Peace? Not in your vocabulary. The entire village recognized what you were destined to become, a berserker in the making. Your childhood wasn't about innocence, but collateral damage. While other Viking children learned practical skills like knot tying and fire building, you specialized in chaotic destruction. Your first wooden sword lasted exactly 1 hour before you demolished it by swinging at a support beam during breakfast, nearly collapsing the house. Your father's resigned sigh said everything. The chicken coop became a battleground. First you tried training the poultry, then challenged the rooster to single combat. When the rooster won, you demanded a rematch. Later, you appeared with one of its feathers braided into your hair, declaring victory. At 6, you fashioned a shield from a barrel lid and charged the family's drying racks, sending laundry flying like battle banners. Your mother called you a storm in human form, while your grandmother told people you were possessed by a warrior spirit. You weren't malicious, just explosively energetic. If something stood, you pushed it. If something moved, you chased it. The village adapted. Neighbors reinforced fences, children played "Avoid the Berserker's house," and girls whispered as you passed. When one brave soul called you goat-brained, you tackled him into a snowdrift and earned your first nickname, Snowbreaker. Your only true companion was a sheepdog named Thorik, who frequently saved you from your own poor decisions, like the time you tried scaling fish-drying scaffolds for training and landed in a pile of haddock. You smelled like fish for weeks. Occasionally, elders suggested sending you to the temple for spiritual guidance. The temple politely declined. So you remained, a child of splintered wood and shattered silence, perpetually coated in mud and mystery. No one taught you restraint because no one dared. By age 7, it was clear you weren't growing into a Viking farmer. You were becoming a Viking legend in the worst possible way. By 8, the village stopped asking, "What's wrong with him?" and started asking, "How do we aim him at our enemies?" There was something unsettling in how you stared down thunderstorms like they'd insulted your honor, how you didn't merely run but charged through obstacles never meant to be charged through. Your appetite became legendary. At one feast, you consumed 3 boiled eggs, 2 fish cakes, and part of a table centerpiece before anyone noticed. When they did, you were already gnawing on a ladle. Your body became a roadmap of bruises and splinters, none of which slowed you down. The local healer eventually stopped treating your injuries, offering only a pat on the back and try aiming for softer parts next time. You developed a distinctive laugh, not joyful but a chest-rattling, I just scared myself and enjoyed it sort of sound. After falling off a roof, breaking a barrel, a crate of onions, and your arm, you declared it the best day ever. You started carrying sticks you called battle staves, giving them names like Skull Tickler and Stick of Pain. Trees became sparring partners, and some trees lost. Chores were abandoned. Every attempt to teach you patience ended with something catching fire. Once a bench, once your own tunic, you stopped wearing that style. Elders began speaking in hushed tones of awe and concern, suggesting you might be Berserker-born, touched by Odin, or perhaps just cursed by excessive goat milk consumption. By 10, someone finally decided you needed formal training, though no one volunteered. Eventually, a one-eyed veteran named Gore the Limp took the job, possibly out of boredom or revenge. His training method consisted of standing 20 feet away and shouting advice like swing harder and less teeth, more axe, as you attacked straw dummies, tree trunks, and the occasional unlucky chicken. He didn't correct your form because you didn't have any, just momentum and the unshakable confidence of someone who'd once arm wrestled an oak tree. While other children trained with precision, you developed what could charitably be called a deeply personal relationship with chaos. Wrestling lessons ended when you suplexed a boy named Eggle into a puddle so hard he developed a stutter. You helped him up and asked to be friends. He declined and moved villages. There was no curriculum, but clearly you were being groomed for something extraordinary. People stopped calling you a boy and started calling you the Project. Gore remarked he hadn't seen such unfocused rage since head-butting a monk during a raid and losing. The only structured lesson you enjoyed. Battle chants, not for the rhythm, just because shouting in unison gave you a socially acceptable way to yell without being told to go outside again. At age 12, your reputation had outgrown your actual physique. Across 3 villages, you were known as that loud kid who headbutts things. One farmer even claimed you made his scarecrow retire. The time had come for your rite of passage, the bearskin ceremony, your official induction into the Berserker Brotherhood. No one explained the details. One morning, Gore simply grunted, handed you a bucket of goat blood, and said, "You'll need this." Your excitement manifested as mild mouth foaming. Deep in the forest, 5 massive men stood shirtless and scarred around a fire, muttering to themselves. One was doing all 3 simultaneously. They nodded at you in that particularly Viking way, emotionless yet vaguely threatening. The ceremony began with painting runes across your chest using the goat blood. The symbols likely meant courage or strength, though one might have said, "Please don't bite me." You resisted sneezing through the process. Then came the bear pelt, enormous, reeking of death and questionable tanning methods, draped over your shoulders like a smelly prophecy. Whether the bear died honorably or simply expired from smelling you remained unclear. As the fire crackled and the berserkers chanted in what was either Old Norse or indigestion, you were handed a horn of suspicious liquid, vaguely alcoholic, definitely spicy, absolutely treacherous. Drinking it in one go proved unwise. Your eyebrows attempted temporary migration. Now came the dancing, if one could call it that. You stomped, howled, and flailed like a thunderstorm having an existential crisis. This ritual, called Becoming the Bear, encouraged not falling into the fire without explicitly forbidding it. When the ceremony concluded through sheer exhaustion, you were given a new name, possibly Wolf Liver or Ulfa's Scream, though the dizziness made it hard to tell. It didn't matter. You were now officially a berserker in training. Let your enemies tremble. You had the fur and were learning to growl. As a junior berserker wearing a pelt that smelled like wet thunder, you now faced one of the most sacred traditions, pre-battle rituals involving questionable mushrooms. Not the stew-friendly variety, but the kind that made clouds seem conversational. No one explained the effects. They just handed you a fistful with the helpful instruction. Chew fast. The taste combined moss, goat sweat, and existential regret. Within minutes, your vision vibrated, and the campfire started discussing philosophy and riddles. Someone burped, and it sounded like war horns. You were ready. This marked your introduction to Berserker trance, tapping into your inner beast, which in your case resembled a confused elk with personal space issues. When a training dummy appeared, you charged without instruction, tackling and neck-biting it. The elders nodded approvingly while the dummy developed existential doubts. "Yep, he's got it," one remarked. The mushrooms came with side effects. Time became elastic. You weren't sure if you'd been screaming for 10 seconds or 3 hours. Attempting to punch a shadow, you accused the ground of betrayal before face-planting into a fish barrel. The fish survived, your dignity didn't. You smelled like oceanic regret for a week. Not all berserkers used mushrooms. Some fasted, some meditated, others relied on pure rage and unresolved childhood trauma. You, however, thrived on hallucinogens, calling the experience brain lightning. No one corrected you. The goal was transcendence, becoming more force than human, less man than natural disaster. The kind of warrior who didn't retreat not from bravery, but because directions became confusing mid-frenzy. This made you simultaneously formidable and incredibly difficult to babysit. You weren't just learning to fight, you were learning to unleash the storm. Finally came your first real battle and inaugural Berserker gang, the technical term for glorious, screaming madness. Waking on battle day, your first thought, violence sounds nice today. You skipped breakfast, having accidentally crushed it with enthusiasm, but accepted the ritual mushroom snack. Your stomach now considered it a food group. The pre-battle dance involved collective shouting while hopping, during which you nearly axed a comrade before being redirected toward a helmet for headbutting. This was considered progress. As enemies approached, the world tunneled. Screaming commenced, possibly yours. Your grip made the axe handle creak. Eyes rolling slightly backward, you earned Gore's approval. He's ready. Then, frenzy. You didn't walk or jog, but charged with the coordination of a walrus on fire. Pain became irrelevant. When grazed by an arrow, you bit a tree in response. A spear wielder got kicked in the knee before you moved on. Tackling 2 men, you fought until forgetting why. This was Berserker Gang, operating on rage, adrenaline, and terrible decision-making. Some called it divine possession. Psychologists would call it dissociation. You called it Tuesday. When the dust settled, you stood barely conscious, covered in blood and bits of someone's helmet. A comrade patted your shield to signal, "We're done," earning a log to the face, interpreted as a compliment. Blinking twice, you muttered, "Good warm-up. Congratulations, you are now officially a berserker." You soon noticed something peculiar about battles, the distinct lack of armor. While others clad themselves in mail and helmets, you wore fur, optimism, and maybe a wrist strap for fashion. Why? Because armor was for people expecting to get hit. Your strategy involved terrifying enemies into submission. If someone landed a blow, that was personal failure to be remembered forever and referenced passive-aggressively at feasts. Armor restricted your signature flailing, 80% of berserker combat, biting, 10%, and fire rolling, 10%. Your bare pelt, smelling like burnt regret, held sacred significance, possibly absorbing fear or warding off steel, mostly absorbing rain while making you resemble an angry rug. The point wasn't looking human, but like something that escaped mythology to haunt coastlines. Your body became the armor. Calluses formed where others wore shields. Scars told stories. Bruises formed constellations. You once got stabbed in the leg and didn't notice until someone pointed out you were leaking. After thanking them, you threw a rock at your attacker. Other warriors mocked your lack of defense until seeing you defeat 3 men with a wooden spoon and a scream. Rage, fur, and zero fear of consequences. Who needed armor? Berserking came with an inconvenient truth. Post-frenzy, everything looked like an enemy. Despite best intentions to only maim the correct people, once screaming and mushrooms kicked in, even comrades seemed suspiciously stab-worthy. Your first incident involved head-butting your shield brother during an axe high-five attempt. He took it in stride while applying moss to the wound. Matters escalated during your third raid, when you mistook a comrade's braided beard for a snake and attempted to punch it off. Later, you threw your helmet at someone shouting your name, your cousin, trying to tell you dinner was ready. No one held grudges because berserkers were essentially violent puppies, messy, unpredictable, and unaware of their own bite strength. You once apologized mid-frenzy after slamming someone, which came out as a roar and thumbs up. He nodded respectfully from the ground. Your warband developed survival tactics. Some wore bright sashes, you forgot anyway. Others stayed 10 feet back while you cleared paths. One clever warrior shouted your name mid-fight to confuse you, resulting in a 20-minute tree chase. Suggestions about bell collars were ignored. You weren't a goat, just goat adjacent. A system emerged. If you charged wrong directions, they waited. If you roared at tents, they'd burn them later so you felt accomplished. Despite accidental injuries, no one wanted to fight without you. Sure, you might hit allies and bite ankles, but you shattered enemy morale just by existing. You weren't just a warrior, you were a natural disaster. Sometimes storms hit friendly boats, but they're still storms. Your reputation now carried weight, not quite respect, but the kind of uneasy recognition reserved for natural disasters and particularly aggressive livestock. In neighboring villages, you were known as the one with the twitch or that boy who allegedly ate a shield. No one confirmed that last story, but you didn't correct them. In the berserker business, myth proved more valuable than memory. Word spread faster than you could. People reinforced fences and hid their goats before your arrival. Children whispered your name during storms. Some adults did too, especially those who remembered when you mistook a feast for combat and flipped 3 tables before someone redirected you with a lamb leg. In battle, enemies hesitated at your approach. Not because you looked impressive, you were usually barefoot, shirtless, and bleeding from somewhere unidentifiable, but because your eyes screamed, "I don't know who you are, and I don't care. I just need something to yell at." This psychological warfare became your greatest weapon. You lacked polished armor or refined technique, but possessed something far scarier: unpredictability wrapped in reputation. Post-battle cleanup became routine. You'd wake clutching a tree branch named Victory, covered in someone else's blood, while a priest offered prayers from a safe distance. You'd accidentally damaged 3 longships, twice by stepping on them, scared off a diplomat by growling during negotiations, and once tried wrestling a statue, losing only technically. Your warband assigned you a handler, someone to steer you away from flammable objects and remind you tents weren't enemies. You'd nod, then punch the ground. Old habits died screaming. Despite the chaos, your legend grew. Skalds sang exaggerated songs, mostly in minor keys, calling you the Howling Hammer of Nordfjord. You liked the title despite remembering no such place, assuming it was something you'd broken. You weren't just a warrior anymore, but a walking tall tale, a cautionary anecdote with shoulders and 0 impulse control. In this brutal world of axes and honor, that made you valuable, or at least entertaining. Love wasn't something berserkers planned for. Emotions were tricky, hard to swing an axe at, and generally uncooperative. Yet one day between raids and headbutts, it happened. She was a blacksmith's daughter, strong-armed, sharp-eyed, and prone to hitting things with tongs when annoyed. You found this inexplicably attractive. She found you interesting, a generous term for dangerous but occasionally funny. Your courtship began classically, by accidentally breaking her father's anvil while testing its durability with a log. She stormed out furious until you offered, with complete sincerity, to fight the anvil's ghost. Her unexpected laughter and subsequent horseshoe to your face somehow became love. Attempting to impress her, you flexed, threw rocks impressively far, and lifted a goat. She watched politely while hammering. Eventually, she agreed to walk with you, partly from interest, mostly because leaving you unsupervised seemed irresponsible. Conversation proved challenging. Your flirting repertoire consisted of screaming and carrying heavy objects, so you carried a log the entire time. Her lack of commentary confirmed she might be the one. Fellow Berserkers questioned the distraction, but you explained she gave you reason not to destroy every tent you saw. That sounds like discipline, one muttered. You ignored him, already carving her name into your bearskin with a stick. She eventually gave you a necklace, simple metal, slightly sharp. You never removed it, especially in battle. When asked why, you said, "It protects me," which was both sweet and mildly concerning. You still didn't understand emotions, but grasped loyalty perfectly. She fixed your gear. You brought her interesting bones. It worked. Arguments occurred. Your attempt at serenading, howling at the moon, was vetoed. Your louder howling earned 3 nights outdoors. Still, she stayed, which in Berserker terms amounted to a marriage proposal. You might be chaos incarnate, but even storms deserved lightning romance. Feasts after battles followed predictable patterns: food, drink, singing, and belching contests. For normal warriors, celebration. For you, a minefield of poor impulse control. You always arrived late. Someone had to scrape off the blood, shirtless, missing a sandal, and carrying questionable items, once a live squirrel. The toast signaled you should drink everything within reach: mead, ale, something smelling like fermented bad decisions. You once accidentally drank lamp oil. No one stopped you. That night you breathed fire. Children still talk about it. Food approached like a personal challenge. You didn't chew so much as declare war on edibles. After inhaling 5 boiled eggs in a minute, you waged battle against a cabbage. Your digestive system, however, failed to match your ambition, leading to the Great Hall incident, an evening of questionable beans, loud singing, and a battle chant followed by acoustically impressive flatulence. Everyone pretended not to notice except one man weeping into his porridge. Then came the fighting, because armed, sleep-deprived warriors and mead created ideal conditions for personal growth. You once started a brawl after mishearing "pass the boar" as "you smell like boar." The benches never recovered. Yet you were always forgiven. You fought passionately, ate with conviction, and your digestive mishaps once scared wolves from the village. By night's end, you'd be asleep under a table, cuddling a ham bone and humming war songs. Berserkers didn't just rage in battle. They partied like the world was ending tomorrow. Every great Berserker had that one story they didn't discuss. Yours was simply called the sheep incident. It began like any raid: longship, coastal village, the scent of overconfidence. Pumped on mushrooms, wearing your bearskin backwards for intimidation, you charged into what appeared to be an empty settlement, just sheep. Most warriors would pause. You headbutt the first woolly blur. The others followed, confused. You destroyed what turned out to be a chicken coop, getting pecked by 5 hens and a rooster named Olaf. Your retaliation, headbutting the sky, had unclear results. Discovering this sacred hut was someone's kitchen, you ate 2 bread loaves and a candle, realizing your mistake when it burned your throat. The farmer arrived, elderly, rake-wielding, mildly irritated. Your battle scream met his turnip throw. Retreat commenced. Back at camp, warriors murmured, "We stole a goat," and burned a cabbage patch. You insisted the vegetables looked threatening. Skalds failed to spin this heroically. History would remember you as the berserker who conquered livestock and lost to root vegetables. The sheep were looking at me funny, you maintained. They nodded. They'd heard worse. Time passed. Your knees began cracking when crouching. People stopped flinching at your axe raises. It now took a full minute to swing. Your beard grayed. Scars predicted weather. You told war stories to anyone. Children, travelers, once a barrel for 3 hours before realizing it wasn't listening. You'd achieved the rare berserker feat of survival. Most burned out young. Too much rage. Too many mushrooms. Not enough ducking. But you? You baffled death through sheer unpredictability. Even gods couldn't guess your next move. Your name now commanded volume, if not respect. Some claimed you were half bear, half wolf, half madman. Math wasn't their strength. You trained young warriors, teaching one to roar from his stomach, another to tackle trees without apology. A third learned to scream, "I am the wind," mid-fight. He now runs a bakery, but still shouts it while kneading dough. Rating decreased after getting stuck in a doorway. You blamed architecture. Instead, you guarded villages, grumbled by fires, and became that irritable landmark elders pointed at while saying, "I remember when he moved faster." Occasionally someone offered mushrooms. You'd sniff and decline, muttering, "Not today, hallucinations." Your blacksmith's daughter still tolerated you, rolling eyes when you growled at thunder, you rolling yours at laundry demands. Neither listened. That was love. Your legacy became presence, not just war. Children played Berserker with sticks and yelling. Elders said, "You remind me of him," when benches got kicked. You might not live forever, but your stories would, loudly and accurately, and probably involving livestock. No one lives forever, not even you, the roaring, mushroom-fueled nightmare of the North. One winter, your bones start arguing with the cold. You grunt more than speak. The fire becomes your favorite weapon, and you sit beside it muttering while polishing your axe with a beard hair you accidentally pulled out while sneezing. Death doesn't scare you. You've shouted at it too many times. You once tried wrestling a thunderstorm just to make the afterlife jealous. If anything, you're annoyed it's taking so long. Any day now, you keep saying between dramatic coughs, chewing rocks for effect. When it finally comes, it's not in battle or during a raid, but peacefully under the stars, wrapped in your old bear pelt that still smells like regret and wet goat. You simply sit back, sigh, and mutter, "Tell Valhalla to reinforce the chairs." They say the skies thundered that night. They say a wolf howled without reason. They say someone found your final words carved into a shield. I regret nothing, except that turnip. Your funeral is predictably chaotic. The village attempts dignity, but ends up with half the mourners brawling after someone claims you once punched a cloud. A goat gets loose. The pyre catches fire prematurely. You would have been proud. Your war band drinks heavily, singing off-key. They toss your old helmet into the fjord. It sinks immediately, just like you did during that drunken swimming contest with a barrel. Children reenact your life with sticks, grunts, and questionable backflips. One bites a log. Everyone agrees. Your spirit lives on. The skalds write ballads, taking creative liberties. You're credited with slaying 20 men in one swing and seducing a forest spirit. No one corrects them. History prefers good stories over facts anyway. You're gone, yes, but never forgotten. Because you weren't just a warrior. You were a walking natural disaster, equal parts chaos and comedy. Long after the fire dies, your roar echoes through sagas, scars, and tavern walls built just a little sturdier because of you. When people imagine Vikings, they picture blood-soaked axes, snarling beards, and questionable hygiene. But here's the twist. Those battle-hardened Norsemen were secretly obsessed with personal grooming. Behind the savage stereotypes stood a culture that valued cleanliness, skincare routines, and looking put together. Archaeologists digging up Viking graves didn't just find swords. They uncovered tweezers, razors, ear spoons, and combs. Lots of combs. Not flimsy ones either. These were carefully carved from bone or antler, sometimes inlaid with decorations. We're talking Viking-era Gucci accessories carried in pouches like treasured possessions. Both men and women owned complete grooming kits stored with the same care as weapons. Because to Vikings, cleanliness wasn't just hygiene, it was honor. Showing up to a feast looking unkempt? That was disrespectful. In a society where reputation was everything, you didn't arrive at the thing, their version of town meetings, looking like a soggy haystack. The line between warrior and fashionista blurred constantly. Oiled beards, braided hair, colorful tunics. These weren't vanity projects, but status symbols. Even slaves had access to basic grooming tools. Unlike later medieval societies that associated filth with piety, Vikings considered cleanliness downright sexy. If you wanted to impress a potential spouse or gain political influence, you started with a clean face and well-combed hair. First impressions mattered. Just ask any Viking woman. Most sagas describe beauty through bright eyes, shining hair, and clear skin, not battle scars. So no, Vikings weren't filthy brutes. They were high-maintenance warriors who conquered with both blades and style. While the rest of medieval Europe debated whether water caused diseases, Vikings were scrubbing down like it was an Olympic sport. Cleanliness was so ingrained they literally named a day after it, Lagerdager, washing day, which eventually became Saturday. Their bathing rituals were social events. Families heated water over fires for wooden tub soaks. The wealthy had dedicated bathhouses. Others made do with rivers. Their soap? A gritty mix of animal fat and ash. Effective, if not luxurious. Some formulas even bleached hair blonde, meaning Viking men were coloring their beards centuries before punk rock existed. Enemies hated this. English monks complained that Vikings washed their faces daily, combed their hair regularly, and, scandal, changed clothes often. One 11th century chronicler even blamed Viking grooming habits for their success with Anglo-Saxon women, claiming local girls were dazzled by these fresh-smelling invaders. Even today, pop culture gets it wrong. TV shows depict Vikings as permanently grimy when in reality, showing up unwashed would earn social disapproval. Status and honor demanded presentability. Your appearance reflected your household's reputation. In death, Vikings were buried with combs and razors, because the afterlife deserved your best self too. The myth of the filthy Norseman? That was propaganda from people who got raided by someone better groomed than themselves. While most of ancient Greece kept women quiet and confined, Sparta broke the mold completely. Spartan women weren't just visible, they owned land, voiced opinions openly, and flexed literal muscles. While Athenian women were locked away like delicate ornaments, Spartan women walked through marketplaces with their heads high, managed estates like CEOs, and verbally sparred with men in public forums. No one dared tell a Spartan woman to know her place. She'd already claimed it, right beside the seats of power. From birth, Spartan girls were raised to be strong, independent, and outspoken. They received nearly identical physical training to boys: running, wrestling, javelin throwing. Not because they were expected to fight, though some did, but because Sparta believed strong mothers produced stronger warriors. Their entire society revolved around warfare, and the next generation of soldiers needed to come from women built like Olympians. Unlike their Athenian counterparts, Spartan women were educated. They could read, write, and, most importantly, speak their minds. History remembers Spartan women for their razor-sharp wit and devastating one-liners. One famous mother, handing her son his shield before battle, said simply, "Come back with it or on it." No tears, no sentiment, just Sparta's brutal standard. Another woman, when asked why Spartan women were the only ones who could rule men, replied, "Because we're the only ones who give birth to men." Then there was the matter of property, a revolutionary concept in the ancient world. Spartan women could inherit and own land outright. By some estimates, they controlled nearly 1/3 of Sparta's territory. While men were off dying gloriously in wars, Spartan women ran the economy, managed households, and kept the city-state functioning. They weren't just influential, they held real power. Marriage in Sparta looked nothing like the rest of Greece. Girls married later, around 18 to 20 rather than 12 to 14, and had unprecedented agency. They could negotiate dowries, initiate divorces, and even, in some cases, choose their partners. One Spartan woman, when asked if she'd ever considered marriage, famously quipped, "Once. But the palace was too far from my gymnasium." Their sexual autonomy shocked other Greeks. Spartan women wore short, slit tunics that showed their legs. Athenians considered this scandalous. They exercised nude alongside men during festivals, their tanned, muscular bodies on full display. While Athenian playwrights mocked them as thigh flashers, Spartan women couldn't care less. As one famously said to a shocked Athenian visitor, "Your women are like statues, only good for collecting dust." Childbirth was treated as their battlefield. Women who died in labor received the same honor as men who fell in combat. Their names carved in stone when most Spartans got anonymous graves. The message was clear: producing warriors was as vital as being one. Aristotle complained bitterly about Spartan women's influence, blaming them for Sparta's decline. But his real issue? These women refused to be controlled. They spoke loudly, owned property, and raised sons who respected female authority. In a world where women were meant to be silent, Spartan women roared. Their legacy endures as one of history's first feminist experiments, not because Sparta intended equality, but because its survival demanded strong women. When a Persian queen asked how Spartan women ruled their men, Gorgo, wife of King Leonidas, replied, "By being the only women who raise real men." In Sparta, even marriage began unconventionally, with a ritual abduction. But don't picture actual kidnapping. This was all theater. The groom would steal his bride from her home, but everyone, including the bride, was in on the act. After the arranged marriage, usually negotiated by families for political or economic reasons, the groom and his friends staged a dramatic raid. They'd sneak into the bride's home, abduct her, and take her to a secret location where an older woman waited to perform the androgyny ritual. This ritual involved shaving the bride's head bald, dressing her in a man's cloak and sandals, and laying her on a straw pallet. Why the masculine makeover? Historians debate this, but it likely symbolized the transition from carefree girl to disciplined Spartan wife. The shaved head may have represented military austerity. After all, Spartan boys got close-cropped hair during their agoge training. Then came the awkward part. The groom would visit his bride secretly at night, often for months. By day, he continued living in military barracks with other men. By night, he'd sneak away for these covert marital visits. Picture a newlywed Spartan, a trained killer who could disembowel an enemy with his bare hands, tiptoeing past his commanders to see his wife. This bizarre arrangement reflected Sparta's priorities, military discipline above all else. Men weren't allowed to live with their wives until age 30. Childhood training and communal living came first. Even marriage couldn't disrupt the war machine. For the brides, this meant returning to their parents' homes after the wedding. They didn't set up households immediately, but waited, sometimes years, for their husbands to finish mandatory military service. In most Greek cities, this would have left women powerless. But Spartan women used this time to manage family estates, build wealth, and, in some cases, take lovers with their husband's blessing. Reproduction wasn't about romance. It was a civic duty. If a husband was deemed weak, another man might be invited to father children, all with the state's approval. The abduction ritual, while strange, served a purpose. It marked the bride's transition into Spartan womanhood, a life of discipline, strength, and responsibility. And those nightly visits? They ensured Sparta's next generation of warriors kept coming. The Viking Age wasn't just about raids and conquest. It was an era of relentless exploration that stretched across continents. While most medieval Europeans rarely traveled beyond their villages, Vikings became history's most fearless adventurers, sailing into the unknown with nothing but wooden ships and sheer audacity. Their expeditions weren't just journeys. They were audacious acts of defiance against geography itself. Picture this, a longship cutting through icy waves, its dragon-headed prow slicing through mist as oarsmen chant rhythmically. These weren't just boats. They were floating masterpieces of naval engineering. Viking ships combined speed, lightness, and durability in ways no other culture matched, with shallow drafts allowing river navigation and sturdy oak hulls weathering Atlantic storms. These vessels became the spaceships of their day, carrying warriors to places locals swore couldn't be reached. First came the British Isles, easy targets with wealthy monasteries and disorganized defenses. But Vikings didn't stop there. They pushed west to Iceland, where geysers and volcanoes made Norsemen believe they'd reached the gates of Muspelheim. Settlement followed swiftly. Within decades, Iceland became a Viking stronghold with its own parliament, the Althing, history's oldest surviving legislature. From there, Greenland's icy shores beckoned. Eric the Red, ever the salesman, named the frozen wasteland Greenland purely as a real estate gimmick. Remarkably, it worked. Then came the big gamble, Vinland. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson's crew spotted strange new lands across the Western Ocean. Newfoundland's Lance aux Meadows stands as evidence, the first European settlement in North America centuries before Columbus. Viking explorers encountered indigenous peoples they called Skraelings, trading and occasionally clashing. But maintaining transatlantic colonies proved impossible with such limited numbers. Vinland was abandoned, its stories fading into legend until archaeologists rediscovered them. Eastward expansion proved equally astonishing. Viking traders navigated Russian rivers, reaching Constantinople, Miklagard, the great city, where they served as the Byzantine emperor's elite Varangian guard. Arabic accounts describe towering, axe-wielding Norsemen with tattoos and impeccable hygiene, a stark contrast to local populations. Some ventured further, reaching Baghdad's markets where they traded furs for silver dirhams. The Volga trade route turned Vikings into medieval globalization pioneers, connecting Scandinavia to the Islamic world. Their navigational skills bordered on supernatural. Without compasses, Vikings relied on sunstones, possibly calcite crystals that polarized light, bird observations, and wave patterns. One saga describes a sailor throwing his wooden bedpost overboard. When it floated ahead of the ship, he knew currents flowed toward land. Such practical ingenuity characterized their entire exploratory approach: trial, error, and relentless adaptation. Every voyage carried existential risk. Ships vanished in storms. Crews starved when provisions ran low. The Greenland colony ultimately failed when climate cooled during the Little Ice Age, isolating settlers who couldn't sustain European lifestyles. Yet Vikings kept sailing, not just for plunder, but for knowledge. Theirs was a culture that valued exploration as much as conquest, where the greatest shame wasn't dying in unknown waters, but never venturing beyond familiar shores. What made Vikings such peerless explorers? 3 factors: technology, tolerance for risk, and pure stubbornness. Their ships could land anywhere. No need for deep harbors when you can beach your vessel like a marine iguana. Their societal structure rewarded boldness. Younger sons with no inheritance became raiders or settlers, seeking fortune abroad. And their worldview embraced uncertainty. Norse mythology featured Yggdrasil, the world tree connecting 9 realms. If the cosmos itself was interconnected, why shouldn't they traverse it? Modern discoveries continue reshaping our understanding. Recent archaeological finds suggest Vikings may have traveled further into North America than previously believed, possibly reaching the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Genetic studies reveal their settlements weren't just male enclaves, but included women and families. Even their failures became lessons. Greenland's collapse offers eerie parallels to contemporary climate challenges. The Viking Age ended when Europe's kingdoms grew stronger and Christianity replaced pagan beliefs. But their exploratory spirit endured. In the DNA of millions with Scandinavian ancestry, in the names of places from Normandy to Russia, and in humanity's unquenchable thirst for discovery. They remind us that history's greatest adventures begin when someone looks at the horizon and says, "What if we keep going?" Meanwhile, in Scandinavia, Viking society thrived on a surprising foundation: laws. Forget the marauder stereotype. Vikings loved legal debates almost as much as axe swinging. Their assemblies, things, were democratic forums where free men, and sometimes women, could voice grievances, settle disputes, and shape communal decisions. Picture a battlefield crossed with a courtroom, minus the paperwork, but with equal shouting. At the local level, village things handled property disputes and minor crimes. More serious cases went to regional assemblies, while the Althing in Iceland became a national parliament where chieftains met annually. Proceedings followed strict rules. Certain offenses demanded specific numbers of witnesses. Oaths carried divine weight. Legal experts, law speakers, memorized entire legal codes, reciting them verbatim during marathon sessions. Forget law schools. Viking jurisprudence required steel trap memories and lung capacity. Punishments balanced pragmatism and poetry. Fines, wargild, compensated victims proportionally, more for a chieftain's death than a farmer's. Outlawry was the ultimate penalty. Declaring someone outside the law meant anyone could kill them without consequence. Some outlaws became legendary figures like Grettir the Strong, surviving years in wilderness hideouts. Other sentences included temporary exile or confiscation of property, but never imprisonment. Vikings considered locking people away wasteful. Better to extract compensation or remove threats permanently. Women enjoyed legal rights unimaginable elsewhere in Europe. They could inherit property, initiate divorces, with valid reasons like abuse or neglect, and serve as witnesses. One Icelandic saga describes a widow successfully suing her late husband's killers, then marrying their leader after he paid Wergil. Romance bloomed in unexpected places. Legal loopholes abounded. Clever defendants exploited technicalities. One man avoided punishment for killing by proving the victim had technically fallen on his own axe 12 times. Another case involved a defendant who argued his accuser had described the crime in incorrect poetic meter, rendering the charge invalid. The assembly reportedly shrugged and acquitted him. These systems weren't perfect. Powerful families sometimes manipulated outcomes, and blood feuds could spiral for generations. But Viking law represented a remarkably sophisticated attempt at ordered society. Their legal innovations influenced modern systems. Iceland's Althing continues today as the world's oldest parliament. Not bad for people supposedly obsessed with pillaging. The Viking reputation for mindless violence ignores their most fascinating trait, an elaborate, often bizarre spiritual worldview where gods blundered through cosmic drama like drunken theater students. Norse mythology wasn't just stories. It was an existential operating system that explained everything from thunderstorms to why your beard froze in winter. This was religion as epic fantasy, with better dialogue and more accidental deaths. At the system's heart stood Yggdrasil, the world tree, a cosmic ash whose roots and branches connected 9 realms. Its trunk wasn't just wood but existence itself, gnawed by dragons, watered by gods, and home to chatty eagles. Imagine the universe as a Starbucks patio where gods, giants, and squirrels debated destiny over mead. That's Norse cosmology. The gods fell into 2 teams, the Aesir, Odin's crew, and Vanir, fertility deities. They'd fought a war so pointless they called a truce and spit into a cauldron to seal it. From this divine saliva emerged Kvasir, the wisest being ever, who was promptly murdered by dwarves and turned into mead. Thus began Norse mythology's recurring theme, great ideas ending badly. Odin, the one-eyed Allfather, pursued wisdom like a stalker, sacrificing an eye for knowledge, hanging himself from Yggdrasil for runes, and constantly disguising himself to trick people into profound conversations. His ravens, thought and memory, brought him gossip from Midgard, Earth, making him history's first invasive surveillance program. Thor, everyone's favorite thunder god, was less deity and more walking OSHA violation. His solution to problems involved smashing them with Mjolnir, a hammer so heavy even he needed magic gloves to lift it. Thor once dressed as a bride to steal his hammer back from giants, proving even gods did questionable things for weaponry. His adventures read like workplace safety videos gone wrong. Fighting sea serpents, accidentally almost sinking the world, and once being tricked into drinking the ocean, he managed about 1%. Loki wasn't even a proper god, just a chaotic freeloader who kept getting invited to parties because he made things interesting. This shape-shifting troublemaker fathered monsters, including Odin's 8-legged horse Sleipnir, started Ragnarok because of a seating arrangement insult, and once lost a bet that ended with his lips being sewn shut. The gods kept him around like a hazardous pet, useful in crises but otherwise contained. Death in Norse belief wasn't an ending but a change of address. Warriors hoped for Valhalla, Odin's VIP afterlife with endless fighting and feasting. But first, you had to die weapon in hand, then be chosen by Valkyries, Odin's supernatural talent scouts. Those who missed the cut went to Hell's Realm, not a punishment pit, but a neutral waiting room for non-warriors. The drowned joined Aegir's underwater mead hall. Farmers probably hoped for reincarnation as decent plows. Ragnarok, the apocalyptic finale, was basically Norse mythology's season finale where everyone dies spectacularly. Fenrir the wolf swallows Odin. Thor and the world serpent kill each other. Loki and Heimdall mutually annihilate. Even the sun gets eaten. Then the world resets like a divine etch-a-sketch, with 2 human survivors repopulating Earth. It's less doom and more dramatic recycling. What made Norse religion unique was its brutal honesty. Unlike faiths promising eternal peace, it acknowledged life's messiness. Gods could die. Prophecies were unavoidable, and the best you could hope for was going down swinging. When Christianity arrived, many Vikings adopted Jesus like a new CEO, keeping their old gods as eccentric department heads. Some Icelanders reportedly baptized themselves, just in case, hedging their spiritual bets. Modern media sanitizes Viking beliefs into superhero tropes, but the originals were weirder. Odin practiced seed, or magic, that involved cross-dressing, taboo for male Vikings. Thor's goat-drawn chariot came with undead goats he could resurrect for dinner. Just don't break their bones. The creation myth involved a giant's armpit sweat. This wasn't Marvel mythology. It was cosmic chaos with occasional profundity. Archaeology keeps uncovering new layers. Rune stones describing forgotten rituals, amulets depicting obscure deities, and evidence of blot sacrifices where blood was sprinkled on idols and participants. At Uppsala, Sweden, a temple reportedly hosted human sacrifices hung from trees. Adam of Bremen's account describes 72 corpses swaying in the wind. Charming decor. The Vikings carried their beliefs wherever they sailed. Thor's hammers have been found from Ireland to Russia. In Normandy, place names still reference Norse gods alongside saints. Even their conversion to Christianity had pragmatic twists. One Icelandic chief praised Jesus because he lets me keep all my land. Faith, like everything else in Viking culture, was negotiable. Ultimately, Norse mythology reflected its creators, equal parts brutal and poetic, pragmatic and absurd. It offered no easy answers, but plenty of memorable stories. The original soap opera where everyone dies in the finale, but the show gets rebooted anyway. Not bad for a belief system invented by people who thought the sun was a chariot chased by wolves. Meanwhile, Viking children grew up in a world where adulthood meant surviving your first winter raid or managing a farmstead at 14. Their childhoods weren't childhoods by modern standards, more like apprentice warrior training with occasional nap times. From the moment they could walk, Viking kids were being groomed for harsh realities through games that would give modern parents heart attacks. Toddlers played with miniature weapons, wooden swords, tiny shields, and small axes. Yes, real ones. These weren't toys so much as introductory combat tools. Parents encouraged roughhousing, believing it built toughness. A scraped knee wasn't comforted. It was mocked until the child stopped crying. Emotional resilience training began at age 3. By 5, children joined in chores that modern OSHA would classify as hazardous labor. Boys and girls carried water from wells, fed livestock, including temperamental goats, and gathered firewood with small hatchets. Some helped in forge work, holding hot metal with thick gloves. One Viking child's grave contained a tiny anvil, suggesting even blacksmithing started young. Education happened through storytelling, sagas recited by firelight, packed with moral lessons and gory details. Kids memorized genealogies like modern children learn pop songs, knowing which ancestors killed whom and why. Poetry competitions, flighting, taught verbal sparring. Insult battles where wit mattered more than punches. A well-timed rhyme could win more respect than a lucky axe throw. Winter was the great teacher. When blizzards trapped families indoors for months, children learned crafts, carving bone needles, weaving nets, making fishhooks from thorns. Girls practiced textile work, spinning, dyeing, sewing, that would outfit future voyages. Boys fashioned traps and repaired tools. Even play served purpose. Board games like Nefataful, Viking chess, taught strategy, while dice games honed math skills for trading. Physical training intensified around age 7. Boys began proper weapons drills, spear thrusts at straw dummies, shield formations with friends. girls trained in self-defense. Some saga women wielded weapons as skillfully as men. Both sexes swam in freezing rivers to harden the spirit. A Viking version of polar plunges without the Instagram photos. By 12, childhood effectively ended. Boys joined hunting parties or short trading voyages. Girls managed households when mothers traveled. Some children were fostered, sent to allied families to strengthen bonds and learn new skills. This wasn't abandonment, but networking Viking style. Your foster father might be a renowned shipbuilder or poet. Teenagers faced adult responsibilities, supervising younger siblings, negotiating minor trades, even participating in local assemblies. A 15-year-old might oversee a harvest crew or join Coastal Watch for raiders. Marriage could come as early as 16 for political alliances, though consummation often waited until 20. The most privileged children, chieftains' sons and daughters, received specialized education. Some studied runes with priests, others apprenticed with master craftsmen. A few even traveled abroad as diplomatic envoys, learning languages and customs. These were Viking child prodigies, fluent in 3 languages by 14, debating trade tariffs before growing facial hair. But this wasn't all grim survival. Archaeological finds reveal toys, wooden horses, dolls, and rattles. Children kept pets. One grave contained a boy buried with his dog and toy boat. Ice skates made from bone suggest winter games. Even Viking kids knew how to play. They just did it between axe-throwing practice and memorizing epic poetry about dismemberment. Child mortality was high. Perhaps 30% died before 5. Those who survived emerged resilient, multilingual, and terrifyingly competent. By 18, a Viking kid might have sailed to Dublin, survived shipwreck, negotiated a wool trade, and composed a dirty limerick about Loki. Modern adolescents would baffle them completely. Viking warfare wasn't the mindless hacking and slashing Hollywood portrays. It was a brutal ballet of strategy, psychology, and carefully cultivated terror. These weren't just fighters. They were medieval special forces who weaponized fear as effectively as steel. Their combat techniques combined pragmatic efficiency with enough flair to make enemies soil their chainmail before blades even crossed. The iconic Viking raid followed precise choreography. Ships would appear at dawn, their dragon-headed prows emerging from mist like mythological beasts. Raiders blew the horns, not the feeble movie toots, but deep, vibrating blasts that echoed for miles. This was psychological warfare 101. Announce your arrival with maximum dread. By the time warriors hit the beaches, half the battle was already won. Panic did the rest. Their signature weapon wasn't the axe, though they loved those, but the shield wall, a moving fortress of overlapping wooden shields. Picture 300 burly Norsemen advancing in lockstep, a bristling hedge of spears protruding from a turtle shell of painted planks. Breaking this formation required either suicidal courage or a very stupid opponent. Most chose to run. Individual combat styles varied by region. Danes favored the long axe, a 6-foot monster that could cleave horses in half. Norwegians preferred the sax knife for close-quarters butchery. Swedes? Spears. So many spears, but all shared core principles. Fight dirty, exploit weaknesses, and never attack fairly when cheating was an option. Berserkers deserve special mention. Not the shirtless, frothing madmen of legend, but elite shock troops who fought in trance-like states. Some likely used hallucinogens. Others relied on ritual chanting or pure rage. Their tactical role? Human battering rams sent to smash enemy lines. A single berserker could disrupt entire formations, creating gaps for comrades to exploit. Their secret weapon wasn't strength, but unpredictability, like fighting a tornado with a death wish. Naval combat was equally ingenious. Viking ships didn't ram like Greek triremes. They boarded. Crews lashed vessels together with grappling hooks, creating floating battlefields. Archers provided cover while warriors crossed via oars laid like bridges. Once aboard, it became a meat grinder of axes and short swords in cramped spaces, the medieval equivalent of a bar fight on a waterbed. Siege warfare? Vikings improvised. When Paris resisted in 885 CE, they built siege towers from stolen wine barrels and tried burning the gates with incendiary pigs. Yes, flaming livestock. At another fortress, they allegedly redirected an entire river to undermine walls. No fancy catapults, just ruthless creativity with available materials. Their greatest tactical edge? Adaptability. Vikings learned from every encounter. After initial raids on England's monasteries, they realized armored cavalry was problematic. Solution: two-handed axes that could lop off horse legs. In Ireland, they adopted hit-and-run tactics from local clans. Facing Byzantine fire ships, they soaked hides in vinegar as primitive asbestos. Every defeat became a lesson, every victory a new trick. Logistics made it possible. Viking raiders traveled light, dried fish, hardtack, and barrels of soured milk, their Gatorade. They foraged ruthlessly but also established forward bases like Dublin and York. These weren't just camps, but thriving trade hubs that resupplied fleets. Think of them as medieval 7-Elevens. If 7-Elevens sold slaves and swords. The ultimate Viking weapon? Reputation. News of their cruelty spread faster than their ships. Tales of the Blood Eagle, a possibly mythical execution method, made enemies surrender without fighting. Some monasteries posted lookouts specifically for dragon-proud ships, the early warning system of the Dark Ages. By the time Vikings landed, many towns paid Danegeld protection money just to make them leave. Why fight when fear could empty treasuries for you? But Vikings weren't invincible. Heavy infantry with disciplined formations could stop them. The Anglo-Saxon housecarls proved this at Stamford Bridge. Poor terrain, like marshes, neutralized their mobility. And against fortified stone castles, they usually failed. Their weakness was patience. Protracted campaigns bored them. Like sharks, they needed to keep moving or suffocate. Modern militaries still study Viking tactics. Their emphasis on mobility, psychological impact, and adaptive thinking foreshadowed special operations doctrine. Their raids were the medieval version of shock and awe. Overwhelming force applied suddenly at weak points. Not bad for guys who thought the sun was a chariot. Meanwhile, Viking art and craftsmanship revealed a culture obsessed with beauty amid brutality. Their artifacts weren't just functional. They were masterpieces of intricate design that would make modern jewelers weep with envy. This was a society where every brooch told a story, every sword hilt whispered myths, and even fish hooks were decorated like royal scepter. The iconic Viking art styles, Osberg, boar, gelling, weren't just pretty patterns, but visual languages. Interlacing beasts and geometric knots symbolized cosmic connections, with no clear beginning or end. A single brooch might contain 8 intertwined serpents forming a heart shape, a puzzle for both the eye and mind. This was art as intellectual flex, proving the maker's skill while honoring the gods. Metalwork reached astonishing sophistication. Using only hammers and crude forges, Viking smiths produced pattern-welded swords with ripple patterns like Damascus steel. The process involved twisting and folding dozens of iron rods, a week's work for 1 inch of blade. Their jewelry employed filigree so fine it required magnifying lenses, found in archaeological digs, proving they understood optics centuries before microscopes. Wood carving was equally magnificent. The Osberg ship's prow alone contained 92 intricate animal figures, each no larger than a thumb. Viking artisans could make wood flow like silk. Their gripping beast motif showed creatures whose limbs twisted into the object itself, as if struggling to escape the material. Functional items like sleds and chests became canvases for mythological scenes. Even everyday objects received artistic treatment. A farmer's comb might feature runic inscriptions warning against lice. Fishing weights were carved like tiny faces. And their famous weather vanes, actually ship's ornaments, swirled with gilt bronze dragons that caught sunlight at sea. This wasn't decoration for its own sake. Vikings believed beauty had power to protect, to honor, to intimidate. Textiles displayed similar virtuosity. The Viberg shirt, a warrior's garment found in Denmark, used 20 thread types per inch, creating iridescent patterns that shifted with movement. Dyes came from madder root, red, woad, blue, and even crushed beetles, purple. Tablet weaving produced borders so complex modern reenactors need years to replicate them. Their artistic decline came ironically through Christianity. As Vikings converted, their unique styles blended with European influences. The style, last pure Viking art, featured sleek, elongated animals that seemed to dissolve into abstraction. By 1100 CE, it too faded, leaving behind artifacts that still dazzle museum visitors. What made Viking art extraordinary was its integration into daily life. A modern parallel would be if Lamborghini designed lawnmowers or Cartier made coffee mugs. For Vikings, beauty wasn't reserved for churches or palaces. It belonged on everything from throne rooms to privy seats. Even their violence had aesthetic standards, poetic insults before duels, decorated weapons for executions. In a world where you might die tomorrow, why not carve your spoon like a masterpiece? The Viking diet was a masterclass in surviving and thriving in some of Europe's harshest conditions. Forget the Hollywood image of meat-guzzling meatheads. These were pragmatic nutritionists who turned limited resources into balanced meals that would make modern dietitians nod approvingly. Their culinary approach combined hunter-gatherer flexibility with agricultural innovation, fueling history's most effective raiders and explorers. At sea, Viking meals were exercises in preservation and portability. Hardtack biscuits, so durable they could double as roofing tiles, provided carbohydrates. Dried fish, cod, or herring supplied protein and omega-3s. The real genius? Skyr, a yogurt-like dairy product that kept for months without refrigeration. Add some dried berries for vitamin C, and you've got a complete meal that fits in a leather pouch. This wasn't just food. It was edible engineering designed for endurance. On land, their diet diversified dramatically. Archaeological evidence shows Vikings weren't just carnivores. They consumed more vegetables than medieval Europeans. Stews bubbled in iron cauldrons mixing barley, peas, onions, cabbage, and whatever meat was available: beef, pork, goat, or game. Fish remained staples, especially herring preserved in whey, a fermentation technique still used in Iceland. Bread came in dark, dense loaves baked with barley or rye, sometimes mixed with ground tree bark during famines. Dairy was the unsung hero of Viking nutrition. Cows, sheep, and goats provided milk turned into cheese, butter, and skyr. Butter wasn't just food. It was currency in some regions, stored in decorative wooden casks. Archaeologists found a 1,300-year-old Viking butter stash in Ireland, still chemically identifiable. That's dedication to dairy. Meat preservation methods bordered on alchemy. Smoking, drying, and salting produced jerky-like provisions. The most Viking preservation technique: burying meat in bogs. The cold, acidic environment acted like nature's refrigerator. Excavations have uncovered millennium-old bog butter still edible, though no sane archaeologist has taste-tested this theory. Feasts were nutritional powerhouses disguised as parties. A typical celebration menu might include roasted pork, marinated in honey and herbs; stewed seabirds, including puffins, taste like fishy chicken; blood pancakes, exactly what they sound like; hazelnut bread with cloudberry jam; mead, honey wine, their Gatorade equivalent. Contrary to stereotypes, Vikings weren't constant drunks. Mead and ale existed, but were typically diluted. Hydration mattered more than intoxication during raids. The drinking horn image is accurate, though. Horns held about a liter, ensuring everyone got equal shares. Some horns even had runic markings indicating measured portions. Their food culture reflected societal values. Communal meals reinforced bonds. The word companion comes from Latin com, with, and panis, bread. Table manners existed. Sagas mention etiquette, like not stealing your neighbor's sausage. Hospitality was sacred. Refusing a meal could spark feuds. When a guest arrived, the first question wasn't "Who are you?" but "Will you eat?" Modern analysis of Viking bones reveals surprisingly good health. Their diet provided complete proteins, complex carbs, and essential vitamins. No scurvy here. Dental health was better than medieval peasants, thanks to fibrous foods that cleaned teeth. Some skeletons even show filed teeth with decorative grooves, possibly filled with pigment. Viking dentistry, part fashion, part intimidation. Their culinary legacy endures. Scandinavian cuisine still features Viking staples: fermented fish, surströmming, dried lamb, hangikjot, and berry preserves. Even their preservation techniques influence modern, foraged food trends. Next time you see a protein bar or meal replacement shake, remember, the Vikings invented portable nutrition, just with more bog butter and fewer artificial sweeteners. Meanwhile, Viking trade networks resembled a medieval version of globalization, minus the tariffs, but with more axe-related negotiations. Their economic system connected 4 continents centuries before Columbus, moving goods, ideas, and unfortunately, people. The slave trade was huge. This wasn't random pillaging, but calculated commerce with established routes and trade goods that would make modern exporters weep with envy. The backbone of Viking trade? Silver, not coins, by weight. They hacked apart Arabic dirhams, German denarii, and jewelry into hack silver measured on portable scales. A Viking trader's kit always included weights, often beautifully carved, and a folding scale. Transactions happened by balancing silver pieces against known weights, the original cryptocurrency. What were they buying and selling? Luxury imports included silk from Byzantium for wealthy women's headdresses, glass beads from the Rhine, status symbols, wine from Francia because local mead got boring, walrus ivory from Greenland, medieval plastic, pepper and spices via convoluted Middle Eastern routes. Exports were equally diverse. Amber from the Baltic, frozen sunlight to Arabs. Furs from Russia, sable, ermine, fox. Iron ingots, Norway's version of steel exports. Soapstone cookware, medieval Tupperware. Down feathers for European pillows. The slave trade, RLL, was horrifically profitable. Vikings captured people during raids, Slavs, hence the word slave, Celts, Franks, and sold them in Constantinople or Baghdad. A strong young man might fetch 200 dirhams, skilled women more. Some slaves ended up in Iceland or Greenland, their DNA still present in modern populations. It was the darkest part of Viking economics. Trade routes followed geography's logic. Swedish Vikings dominated the east, down Russian rivers to the Caspian and Black Seas. Danes focused on Western Europe, trading with Frisian middlemen. Norwegians went Atlantic, to Ireland, Scotland, and beyond. But all routes intersected at Hedeby, Denmark, and Birka, Sweden, medieval versions of Singapore or Dubai. Their ships made it possible. The Nar, a broader, deeper cargo vessel, could carry 24 tons of goods plus crew. That's equivalent to 15 modern SUVs of merchandise. With such capacity, a single successful voyage could make a trader wealthy for life, if storms or pirates didn't intervene. Trade wasn't just economic, it spread culture. Runes adapted from Roman script. Artistic styles blended Celtic knots with Norse beasts. Even religious ideas transferred. Some Thor's hammers have cross shapes, hedging spiritual bets. The ultimate Viking trade lesson? Globalization isn't new. It just used to involve more mead and fewer Zoom calls. The Viking Age didn't so much end as fade into history's tapestry, not with a dramatic collapse, but through gradual assimilation that transformed raiders into royalty. This transition from pagan marauders to Christian kings represents one of history's most fascinating cultural metamorphoses, proving even the most fearsome warriors eventually trade axes for accounting ledgers. The first cracks appeared in Scandinavia itself. As Viking wealth grew, centralized kingdoms emerged. Denmark under Harald Bluetooth. Yes, that Bluetooth. Norway unified by Harald Fairhair, and Sweden's early medieval kings. These rulers recognized that running kingdoms required more than just battle prowess. It needed tax systems, laws, and diplomatic marriages. Raiding became state-sponsored rather than freelance. The difference between privateers and navies. Christianization played the ultimate long game. Missionaries initially made little headway. Vikings found the idea of turning the other cheek ridiculous. But as Christian Europe grew stronger, pragmatism won. Kings realized baptism came with political benefits, alliances, trade deals, and recognition from powerful neighbors. When Denmark's Harald Bluetooth converted around 965 CE, it wasn't just spiritual, it was strategic positioning against the Holy Roman Empire. The process wasn't smooth. Many Scandinavians practiced dual faith, baptizing just in case, while secretly leaving offerings to Thor. Runestones show this transition beautifully. Some mix Christian crosses with Thor's hammers, hedging celestial bets. Over generations, though, Norse paganism faded into folklore. Trolls replaced giants. Saints co-opted godly attributes, and Yule became Christmas. Meanwhile, Viking colonies followed different paths. Iceland's Althing voted for Christianity in 1000 CE to avoid Norwegian trade sanctions, a business decision disguised as revelation. Greenland's settlers clung to Norse ways until extinction, their frozen churches standing as eerie memorials. Normandy's Vikings became French-speaking dukes within 2 generations. Their descendant William conquered England in 1066, making Vikings history's only self-replacing invaders. Eastern Vikings faced different pressures. The Kievan Rus, Swedish-descended rulers of early Russia, adopted Orthodox Christianity from Byzantium. Their Varangian Guard became elite Byzantine soldiers, trading longships for Greek fire. Arabic accounts describe these Viking-descended warriors as towering, axe-wielding palace guards who drank like fish but fought like demons. What killed the Viking Age? Several factors. Stronger European defenses, stone castles were raid-proof. Internal Scandinavian conflicts, and climate change's Little Ice Age making northern voyages riskier. But the deepest reason? Vikings succeeded too well at assimilating. Their descendants became English nobles, Russian princes, and French knights, leaving the old ways behind. Yet Viking DNA and influence endure. Genetic studies show Scandinavian ancestry in millions. 6% of UK males carry Viking Y chromosomes. Linguistic traces abound. English words like sky, egg, and law come from Old Norse. Even democracy's roots owe something to Viking things. Those open-air assemblies where free men debated and voted. Modern archaeology continues reshaping our understanding. Ground-penetrating radar recently revealed buried Viking ships in Norway, while isotopic analysis of teeth traces individual life journeys from Baghdad to Dublin. Each discovery confirms Vikings weren't just mindless raiders, but sophisticated travelers who connected disparate worlds. Their legacy lives in contradictions, brutal yet artistic, destructive yet innovative, pagan yet adaptable. Perhaps that's why Vikings fascinate us today. They represent raw human potential for better and worse. In an era of safe choices and digital lives, their willingness to sail beyond known horizons still inspires. As the sagas said, man is not dead while his name is still spoken. By that measure, Vikings remain very much alive. The Viking afterlife wasn't just Valhalla's mead halls, it was history's embrace. From Normandy's castles to Russian czars, from English Parliament to American explorers, Leif Erikson has his own U.S. holiday. Their descendants shaped civilizations. Even their gods survived. Thor's name graces Thursday, while Tolkien's Middle-earth borrowed heavily from Norse myths. What can we learn from Vikings today? Adapt or perish. They mastered this through centuries of transformation. Respect craftsmanship. Their artifacts still awe us a millennium later. And perhaps most importantly, leave good stories. Vikings understood that how you're remembered matters more than how you died. Their sagas weren't just entertainment, but immortality in word form. So raise a horn or coffee mug to history's most misunderstood people. They terrorized coasts, opened trade routes, inspired art, and vanished into the cultures they once raided, only to reappear centuries later in our books, films, and DNA. Not bad for folks who thought the sun was a chariot. Scowl.